And we're going to start doing our closing disclosure. So we're going to just jump right in. We said everything we need to say last night to lead up to it. And this is good because we'll get to review such things as prorating, interim interest, talk about things that are debits and credits. So as with anything, guys, you know, the first few settlement statements you do, you're not going to be great. How do you get better at them? You do more and more and more. You practice, practice, practice. So I'll show you. I got plenty of practice for you guys. Never fear about that. In the Unit 21 Learn, Test, Pass material, I do have, here's a mini CD 1 with answer key, 2 with answer key, 4 and 5 with answer key. So here's some extra ones practice for you here. We're going to do mini CD 1 in class. By the way, if you're curious about mini CD number 3, I think number 3 is a lot more complicated than what you will ever see on a test. So I chose not to put it up there. If at some point you're up for the challenge, just shoot me an email and I'll be happy to send you CD3. But do 1, 2, 4, 5, the ones in the books, the other ones I got for you guys before you ask me for 3, because 3 is tough. So when you start doing these mini CDs, I want you to take a blank piece of paper and I want you to draw a line down the center. And I want you on one side of the line to write credits, and on the other side of the line, write debits. So like we have here in this mini CD 1, I got credits on one side, debits on the other. It does not matter which side is which. You have credits on one side and debits on the other. And we're going to work through this problem together. Get myself set up just right. Can you guys see that okay? There's a little bit better. Can you guys see that okay? The wording here. Some of these closing disclosures are going to see like what you have here, like bullet points. Some are just one big run-on paragraph. However they are, when you guys do these, I always want you to go in order of the closing disclosure, right? Start from the top and you work your way down. Don't hunt and peck and look for, ooh, let me do prorated taxes. Ooh, let me find the sales price. Start from the top and work your way down. Because if you skip around, you're bound to skip something. So start from the top. As we said last night, hands down, this is the math that's going to take you the longest. So first off, when you guys are taking both of your exams, mine and your state exam, I always want you to do the math last anyway. Okay, you can bookmark a question and come back to it, so you don't worry about skipping it. But the math is always going to take you the longest. And I don't want you guys to get caught up in the math and run out of time and not answer everything else. So that's just my suggestion. Save the math for last. And of the math, do this one the very end. So now you're at this problem that will take you the longest of anything that you have, and you know how much time you have to work it. As we said last night, this is the math that's going to take you the longest. It's a whole lot of work for just one question. But you know what? If you can get this math, you might have a standalone problem just on proration. You might have a standalone problem just on interim interest. So if you can learn this, you might get several math questions. If you can learn how to prorate, it'll not only help you with this one, but also with another question. You're going to be given all this information, and bottom line for your exams, you're going to be asked, how much cash must the buyer bring to settlement? So please keep in mind, we only care about the buyer. I don't care about the seller. All I'm focusing on is the buyer's debits and credits. Any questions before we get started? Go ahead and turn to your book, pages 561 and 562. Or if you made, remember I put these debits and credits on PowerPoint last night, so if you make notes, but absolutely reference what's a debit to the buyer, what's a credit to the sellers. You guys are learning it. That's how you learn, is by referencing. And if you guys want to go ahead and get your private chat ready, because you're getting ready to send me lots of private chats. And I'm going to ask you questions like, is this a debit to the buyer or credit to the buyer? And you can say D or C. You don't have to worry about typing out debit, typing out credit. If I ask if it's a debit or credit and you tell me it's a D, I know what you're talking about. So that'll save us a little bit of time there. Questions before we get started? We're just ready to jump right in and do this. $561 and $562. Okay. Here we go. Buyer enters into a purchase contract with the sellers to buy the seller's house for $210,750. Private chat. Is the sales price a debit or a credit to the buyer? D or C to the buyer, sales price. Anna, can you rename yourself? So if you go under participants, click on participants. And then you find your 5785 PC1. Hover over that and click on more. And then click on rename. It starts in participants. Okay. So the first thing we came across in this closing disclosure, thank you, was the sales price. And as most of you said, the sales price is a debit to the buyer. That is money that they owe the seller. That's the whole gist of our contract, isn't it? It takes us 15 pages for the buyer to promise to pay the seller in exchange for the seller's property. Goodness, are we long-winded or what? So the sales price on page 561, the sales price is always going to be a debit to the buyer. And when I'm doing these, I like to label my entries. So for me, SP stands for sales price. By labeling my entries, in the event that I have to go back and look at something, it allows me to quickly identify what these numbers are. That's just my preference. You can take that tip or not. The purchase contract provides for a November 24th settlement. I tend to like to write my settlement date somewhere in the top of my paper. Again, save me a few minutes on the test. I know I'm going to have to reference it. I know I'm going to need this date. So I like to jot it on the top corner of my paper so I can have it for ease. The seller has paid taxes prior to closing and will be prorated at settlement using a 360-day method. Taxes for the year are $2,610. When I prorate, I like to see what it is that I'm prorating. I like to draw my picture. So I have my year for property taxes. What divides the year is the day of settlement. And in this problem, settlement is November 24th. The seller owns the property the front part of the year. The buyer owns the property the latter part of the year. So I've seen my timeline. I see my annual taxes. and I see what the dividing factor is. The problem tells us that the seller has paid taxes prior to closing. Taxes have been paid, which means the seller has already paid the entire year. The seller has paid the full year. So stop and ask yourself, who owes whom? If the seller's paid the taxes for the whole year, who owes whom? And what we're coming up with, the buyer is going to owe the seller for the period of time that they owe the property. So on the CDs, how it's going to shake out is a debit the buyer, credit the seller. The buyer owes the seller for the day after closing to the end of the year. That's the period of time that the buyer owned the property. The seller's already paid taxes. So think of it as the buyer reimbursing the seller. The seller's paid the taxes. Now they're selling their home. Is it fair for the seller to have to pay those days that they don't own the property? Put yourself in the seller's shoes. Absolutely not. So we're going to do a debit the buyer, credit the seller for this period of time. What's the period of time? Y'all got your fingers ready? You want to count with me? You got the 25th, 26, 27, 28, 29. I got 6 days left in November, plus 30 days in December. The buyer owes the seller for 36 days of taxes. Everybody good so far? If annual taxes are $2,610, I want to take that annual and break it down to daily. So I take my annual, divide it by 360. To get daily taxes of $7.25. Every day this year, taxes are $7.25. Buyer owes the seller for 36 days. So the total that we're looking at that the buyer owes the seller, as we just said, is going to shake out as a debit to the buyer for $261. Now the seller has been, again, think of it about the sellers being reimbursed. Seller's going, I've already paid this. Somebody owes me some money. Well, there's only two parties to the contract. So if the seller feels owed some money, the only person left to pay them is the buyer, yes? And they're going to pay for the time that they own the property. Everybody's responsible for the period of time that they own the property. What questions do I have? Everybody good on how we got the 261, debit the buyer? I'm getting ready to erase this proration math unless you guys tell me otherwise. Speak now if you still need it. Okay. Continuing on, says debits and credits for the following items should be made to common practice. What's common practice? 561 and 562. What you see on 561 and 562 is how things are typically handled. That's common practice. Again, you guys always do what the problem tells you. So if the problem tells you to charge that's not typical, you're always going to do what the problem tells you. So we got earnest money of $4,500. Tell me in the chat, C or D, is this a credit or a debit to the buyer at settlement? Okay. The day of settlement, earnest money deposit, debit or credit to the buyer. D or C to the buyer. At settlement, the earnest money deposit is going to be a credit to the buyer. Remember, they already paid this when we went under contract. And when we went under contract, we looked at our buyer and we said, if you make it to closing, your earnest money will be credited back to you. So now here we are at closing, and we got to do what we promised, right? So they've already paid it. Remember, it's kind of like their down deposit. So now we're crediting back to them $4,500. Financing, I got a new conventional loan of $175,000. Is the loan amount, D or C, debit or credit to the buyer? The loan amount, the day of settlement. Loan amount of $175,000, debit or credit to the buyer. And today being the day of settlement, the loan amount is a credit to the buyer. We cannot close if the lender doesn't show up with that money on the buyer's behalf. Today, it's being applied towards the borrower. It completes their promise to the seller. I promised to buy your house for X amount. Part of that's going to be with a loan. So the day of settlement, remember these closing disclosures, they're like snapshots of today. What's happening today of settlement. So today on the settlement statement, the loan amount will always be a credit to the buyer. Questions on that? We're kind of back and forth on that one. The loan amount. Now, tomorrow and for the next 30 years, it's going to be a debit to the buyer, right? Because they're going to have to pay the lender back. So the lender brings money on their behalf today, and then I'm going to spend the next 30 years paying you back. Okay, we're good. Conventional 30-year mortgage loan with a fixed interest rate of 7.5%. Hang on to that interest rate. We'll have to come back to that in just a second. The lender's charging a 1% loan origination fee and 2 discount points to be paid by the borrower. Remember, any lender charge, discount point, loan origination fee is going to be of the loan amount. What does the lender care about? The lender cares about how much is coming out of my pocket. The lender cares about the loan amount, right? So any lender charge will be of the loan amount. So let's start with our loan origination fee. They're going to charge 1%. So we're getting ready to see, and I said charge. And you can look for verbiage such as to be paid by the buyer. That's a debit, right? That's money coming out of the buyer's pocket. So I got a loan origination fee, 1%. And then we also have 2 discount points. Show me on your fingers. 2 discount points is equal to what percentage of the loan? 2 discount points is equal to 2% of the loan. So you take, again, the loan amount times 2%. And we get discount points for 3,500. And we just decided that both the loan origination fee and discount points were going to be a debit to the buyer. So charge to the lender for the loan origination fee, a charge to the buyer for the discount points, both debits to the buyer. Questions? Everybody good if I erase the math here? Everybody good? Speak up. It's gone away. Then we have interim interest through November 30th on the borrower's new mortgage. If we're going to closing today being November, what did I just say, 24th, tell me in a private chat, if we go to closing today, when will the borrower's first mortgage payment be due? If we go to closing on November 24th, when will their first mortgage payment be due? So whenever the borrower is originating a new loan, they always skip the first. There is not a payment due on December 1st. The first payment is due, Happy New Year, on January 1st. Whenever we originate a new loan, skip the first. Tell your buyers they get a month off. They just bought a dang house. Anything like that makes them happy. When they make that payment on January 1st, when they make that first payment on January 1st, they're paying December's interest because interest is paid in arrears. So what the lender's going to do at settlement is collect interest for the day of closing to the last day of that month. Interim interest is always the day of closing to the last day of that month. Never go into the next month. Now we count 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. The buyer owes their lender for the rest of November, including the day of closing. Questions so far? So now we got to figure out how much. I take my balance, my loan amount, my balance, times my interest rate, which we got. We have to go back in the problem just a little bit to be reminded that our interest rate is 7.5%. That hurts, doesn't it? I take my balance times my interest rate. And I get annual interest. And then I need to take that annual interest and break it down to daily. So the balance times the interest rate equals annual interest. And then I divide by 360 to get daily. And we get daily interest $36.46. Buyer owes their lender for 7 days. So I have a charge, a debit to the buyer for interim interest of $251.21. Now the buyer has paid their interest to December 1st. They are caught up on their interest payment. Questions? Are you within pennies of me? Careful about rounding. They say if you round, go out 3 decimal places, at least 3 decimal places. I tend not to clear my calculator if I don't have to, because I don't want to do away with human error. So I got 13,125. I divided by 360 and I got 36.4583333. And then without clearing my calculator, I hit times 7. And then I rounded my 20 cents to 21 cents. If you're a few pennies off from me, you're okay. Guys, you're not going to miss a question just by rounding alone. In other words, the multiple choice answers aren't so close that if you're a few cents off from me, you're not going to get the same thing. With that being said, I can almost promise you there will be an answer choice off by $36.46, expecting you not to count your days right. So you can't miss by rounding alone, but you can miss by not counting your days right. Does the buyer pay for principal for those 7 days or just interest? Just interest. Just interest. They don't make that first principal payment, that first mortgage payment until January 1st. But don't worry, the lender will get their money. And in the eyes of the lender, in the mind of the lender, I originated a loan today, so I want to start getting paid on it today. Questions? Interim interest. The buyer's getting caught up. That's all we're doing. We're just getting the buyer caught up. By the way, I meant to verify. We've all been calculator shopping, right? If you haven't been calculator shopping, you got about less than 3 weeks. Basic calculator for exam only. Everybody good? If you haven't done it yet, I suggest you do it so you can practice it on it. Can't let you use your phone on your test. I cannot let you use a TI-83 calculator, anything that stores formulas. You guys like to show up on test day and say, but I don't know how to do it. Doesn't matter. The device will allow you to store formulas, so I can't let you use it. Basic calculator only. Interim interest. We good? Can I erase my interim interest math? Okay. Continuing on. This lender is charging private mortgage insurance for the first year. And the first year, they're going to go ahead and collect due at closing. So when you see words like due, you know that's going to be a debit to the buyer. That's money that they owe. Due at closing, 0.4% of the loan amount. Again, the word of in a word problem means what? Multiply. So you take your loan amount. I'm dealing with the lender, PMI insurance, the loan amount. And this particular lender, this problem, is going to charge 0.40%. Do not forget that point. It's very important. So 175,000 times 0.40% means we're going to have a debit. It's due for $700 for private mortgage insurance. Loan amount times 0.40%. At settlement, the buyer will have to pay in full for their first year homeowners insurance policy. When you pay insurance, you're always paying for services in advance. Think about your car insurance. If you make your car insurance payment today, you're covered for the next 6 months, right? Same thing with homeowners insurance. When you pay for homeowners insurance the day of closing, you're covered for the first year that you own the property. So homeowners insurance will always collect from the buyer their first year homeowners insurance. In this case, it is $444. That's our homeowners insurance. Let's put insurance. After closing, the attorney will send a check to State Farm or Allstate or Geico or whoever you chose for $444. If you're going to closing on November 24th, you're covered from today till November 23rd next year. Homeowners insurance, you're always going to pay the first year at settlement. Due diligence fee, credit or debit to the buyer, C or D. Due diligence fee, credit or debit, C or D. So for the buyer, the due diligence fee will always be a credit at closing. They already paid it once. And again, remember, we told them we went under contract. You pay the due diligence fee, you pay the earnest money, and if we make it to closing, these will both be credited back to you at settlement. They prepaid that money when we went under contract. If I have any accounting minds in here, a credit erases a debit. Yes. So how do you erase that? You credit. Same thing. A debit erases a credit. So we're just reversing what we did when we went under contract. We're zeroing it out. Attorney's fee, debit or credit to the buyer, D or C to the buyer, attorney's fee. If you made it in the chat, that one was 100%. That will be a debit to the buyer. They got to pay the attorney for doing their job. So we're going to charge the buyer attorney's fee of $450. Title insurance, D or C, debit or credit to the buyer. Title insurance, the day of settlement. Title insurance is also going to be a debit to the buyer. Remember, title insurance premium is a one-time fee. So at settlement, the buyer pays for their new policy, which is called the owner's policy. Because by the time title insurance kicks in, the buyer is who? They are the brand new owner. So there's an owner's policy, and the buyer also gets to pay for the lender's policy if the lender's involved. Stop and think for 1 second. Tell me in the chat, what are we going to do with the deed preparation fee? Deed preparation fee. The deed preparation fee, some of you I couldn't trick. The deed preparation fee is a debit to the seller. So what are we going to do with it on this problem? There's your distractor. This is why we need to know seller's debits. Look on page 562 before y'all get mad at me. 562. Seller pays to have the deed prepared. The buyer pays to have the deed recorded. That's why we have to know seller debits. See what they like to do? And I can almost promise you, one of these answer choices are going to be off by $65. So for figuring out how much the buyer has to bring to closing, yes, I still need to know the seller's debits and credits because that's what they do. Y'all mad at me now? This is how we learn, right? All right, so I already gave you the answer on this one. If the seller pays to have the deed prepared, then the buyer pays to have the deed recorded. Think about it this way. When the attorney is getting the deed ready for closing, when they are preparing the deed for closing, it's still the seller's deed. So the seller gets to pay to have the attorney prepare their deed. Once we go to closing, it's in the buyer's best interest to have their brand new deed recorded. So the seller pays to have it prepared. The buyer pays to have it recorded. Questions? A question came in. I thought this due diligence fee was something the seller keeps regardless. Absolutely. So at closing, we do a credit the buyer, but we're also going to do a debit the seller. We're reversing that charge. We're reversing what we did when we went under contract. So at closing, the due diligence is going to be a double entry. Credit the buyer and debit the seller to reverse what happened at contract formation. And you're correct. The only time the seller will have to give back the due diligence, like actually pay the buyer the due diligence, if the seller is in breach. Other questions so far? We're doing good, you guys. You guys are doing good. Survey, debit or credit to the buyer, D or C? You good now though? Question come in, isn't the survey prepaid? The only things paid outside of closing, unless you're told otherwise, are the appraisal and the credit report fee. Unless you're told otherwise, POC, appraisal, credit report fee. Everything else is paid at settlement unless you're told otherwise. And that includes the survey, and I just gave it away. It's paid at settlement, which means it's a debit to the buyer. There's usually some kind of courier fee or wire transfer fee or some kind of handling fee. Not uncommon, just another way to nickel and dime you. Buyers usually have a fee. Sellers may have one too. So when you see courier fee, wire transfer fee, processing fee, it's a fee. Fee means there's money owed, so that's a debit.
Julie, I have a question.
Yes.
Are all surveys, are they required or some just, up to the buyer whether or not they wanted to have a survey?
Highly recommended.
Okay.
If there's a question about a flood zone, the lender may require it, but for the most part, they're just highly recommended. So the last piece of this, we've talked about your escrow account. Your lender has an escrow account. They collect 1/12 of your taxes and 1/12 of your homeowner's insurance. So when those bills come due, taxes at the end of next year, homeowner's insurance in November of next year, when those bills come due, the lender's been collecting money from you throughout the year to pay those bills on your behalf. That's your escrow account. At settlement, the lender has to originate your escrow account. They got to open up your escrow account. And they also want to collect some money to have as a cushion. Is there a pretty good chance taxes can go up next year? Unfortunately, yes. Is there a pretty good chance that homeowners insurance can go up next year? Unfortunately, yes. So in order for the lender to ensure that they have enough money in your escrow account to pay those bills on your behalf next year, at settlement, they collect a cushion. They give themselves a little cushion. So in addition to prorating the taxes, and in addition to collecting the first year of homeowners insurance, the lender's also going to collect a couple months for your escrow account. So we're going to collect 4 months of real property taxes. If we go up just a bit, we're reminded that annual property taxes were $2,610. Everybody remember that? Annual taxes were $2,610. If we take that annual amount, what did I just say? 2,610? Is that what I just said? Is that right? Oh, thank you. Okay. My little brain, y'all, I'm telling you. So if we take that 2,610, I need to take that annual and break it down to monthly. How many months are in a year? 12. So we're going to take the annual and divide by 12. I get $217.50. That's how much monthly taxes were this year. The lender wants to collect how many months at settlement? They want to collect 4 months. So if I take my monthly times 4, we're getting ready to see a debit to the buyer of $870 to put in the buyer's escrow account to have as a cushion in case taxes go up next year. there's a really good chance that taxes next year are going to be more than $2,610. Just the way it goes. They also want to collect 2 months of property insurance. And again, we look up in the problem, we reminded our annual homeowners insurance is $444. If I want to take annual and break it down to monthly, I divide by 12. The problem tells us they want how much for our escrow account? They want to collect how much? 2 months. So our annual is 37 times 2 months, which means we're going to have a reserve. We're going to have a reserve in our escrow account for $870 for real property escrow and $74 for homeowners insurance. Questions on what we just did? This is above and beyond prorating this year's annual taxes. This is above and beyond paying this year's taxes. We're preparing your escrow account for next year and the year after that and the year after that. Here's the good news. When you close this home, let's fast forward 5 years real quick. Let's fast forward 5 years real quick. Part of their calculation for your loan payoff amount will be a credit for any money that you have in your escrow account reserve. So this money is not going to waste. If they don't use this money to pay bills on your behalf, you will get this money back. It's your money. They're just hanging on to it in escrow so they can pay these bills on your behalf. Questions? Let me see what we did with the escrow. Questions on anything before we move on to the next step? We worked that problem from top to bottom. We put the buyer's credits on one side. We put the buyer's debits on the other. If you don't know what's a debit or what's a credit, you don't know what side to put it on, right? So 561 and 562 are your formulas. So now what you guys need to do, take a minute, add up all the buyer's credits and all the buyer's debits. Just add. Get that on your paper. You can add the buyer's credits. What do you get for that total? And the buyer's debits. I'll give you a minute to add. I got to add two real quick. Give you another minute to add. Just straight line adding. Some of you are already going on to the next step, and I'm loving it because you guys are getting it right. So we take all the buyer's debit, sales price, prorated taxes, loan origination fee, discount points, interim interest, and we add it all up. And for the buyer's debits, I get $219,869.21. And then I add up all their credits, earnest money deposit, loan amount, and due diligence fee. So we get all their credits of 179,750. Debits minus credits tells us how much the buyer has to bring to closing. Debits minus credits, $65 off, isn't it? Debits minus credits tells us how much the buyer has to bring to closing. So if you take 219,869.21 minus 179,750, how much does your buyer have to bring to closing? $40,119.21. That cannot come in the form of a personal check. They're going to have to bring a cashier's check or a wire transfer. Ask the lender. Pick up the phone and call the lender and say, hey, how do you want my guys to bring their money to closing? We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Questions? Concerns? I'm pleased, you guys. I hope you are as well. These are something that you got to do. Just something you got to do. There's some at the end of Unit 21. There's a couple here in Learn, Test, Pass. There's some in that math workbook I showed you guys about last night. You have the answers. Remember, if you get stuck, these are perfect examples of how you can take a picture of your work, your debit credit line, and I can usually get you pretty unstuck pretty quick. So before y'all start banging your head on the desk trying to figure out what you're doing wrong, just email me. It's not worth having a bruised forehead. Let me help you get unstuck as you're practicing. Somebody just said they love this. I've never heard that before. I'm going to cry. Thank you. Okay, everybody good? This isn't too bad, is it? As long as you know what's a debit to the buyer, what's a credit to the buyer. And yes, you have to know the sellers because they like to put stuff like deed preparation fee in there, excise tax. So if you spend time with 561 and 562, or remember, I took those 2 pages and put them on a PowerPoint for you. So if you spend time with that, it's just a matter of what side of the line does it go on? Is it a credit or a debit?
Julie, this reminds me of accounting when I took it in college with our
Pretty
assets
much,
and
isn't it?
liabilities. Yeah.
Exactly. And you know what, Lexi, that's a good point because I'll tell you, I told you when you come see me in post licensing, we're going to do a full-blown settlement statement. And do I have any accountants on the call? I know we may have taken accounting, but do I have a couple accountants? You guys, what you may struggle with this is in accounting world, debits and credits mean something totally different, don't they? So you got to retrain the way accountants, the way you think. Debit and credit no longer means left or right. Credit is a plus, debit is a minus when you're doing these. So I got to get you to retrain your brain. Everybody good? Now, obviously this one took us an hour because this was our very first one. If you practice these, you could probably get through it in 20 minutes or so on your exam, save you some time on the exam. If you don't practice it, if you never touch this again until your test in a couple weeks, then you're going to be spending more time on it. But if you can do a few of these, pick up your time a little bit, save this for last, always save this for last. You'll be able to get it. There's an extra point on your test, and you're starting to learn one of the biggest fiduciary responsibilities you owe your client. Okay. Good job, guys. Let's go take a break. We come back, we're going to put on our appraiser's hat. So I am taking attendance. I forgot, before we put on our appraiser's hat, we get to Kahoot. So we can shake off all that financing we did. So get your phones. And this Kahoot is on units 14, 15, and 21. No math. So 14, 15, and 21. So either you are going to the website or you're getting your app. If you do that, you're going to put a game pin in 918-8305. Or you're scanning the QR code, which I understand from you guys just drops you right in. And you put your name in. Of course, if you don't want to play on your phone, you can always play in your mind, gauge how you're doing. I say channel your inner competitiveness. I think somebody's phone just went to sleep. Everybody in that wants to be in? Once you guys wake your phones back up? Everybody in that wants to play? Everybody good? Ready? All right, let's Kahoot. 14, 15, and 21. See what we got. If not, I got you now. A mortgage loan can have its lien priority lowered through the use of a 10 seconds. Mortgage loan can have its lien priority through the use of a subordination agreement. Remember, subordinate, you're placing yourself in a lower rank. So we talked about your senior mortgage and your junior mortgage. Your junior mortgage gets paid after the senior because it was recorded after the senior. The senior is not going to agree to refinance unless the junior agrees to subordinate, unless the junior agrees to be placed under a lower ranking. Questions on this one? Let's see who got it right the fastest. Yen, good job. Tara, Skater Girl, cute. Is that like a little devil or something? All right. And then Lewis. So good job. Let's see. Question number 2. The right a borrower has to regain the property ownership by paying the debt after a foreclosure sale is called eight seconds. The right a borrower has to regain property ownership. Good job, you guys. They have is to redeem themselves. They can save themselves from losing the property to foreclosure if they can come up with the amount due. Questions on this one? So we got Yan stayed on top, Skater Girl and Lewis. Gracie crept up, Manny crept up. The competition is on. Question number 3. The main purpose of a mortgage is to ten seconds. The main purpose is to provide security for the loan. The mortgage is the collateral that the lender has on the property in the event of the borrower's default. In North Carolina, we're fancy. We call the mortgage the deed of trust, interchangeable, 6 to 1, half dozen the other. Questions on this one? It does create a lien. That's an effect of it, but its purpose is to provide security for the loan. The main purpose is to provide security for the loan. Okay. So we got Yan, Lewis, our devil's back, NA, and Gracie. Shanika's our highest climber this round, up 8 places. Good job. Question number 4, Fannie Mae. Ten seconds. Fannie Mae buys. Fannie Mae is a player on the secondary mortgage market. Secondary mortgage market purchases loans from the primary mortgage market. Fannie's the oldest, she's the biggest, and she's the hungriest. There's nothing that Fannie won't buy. Fannie will buy them all. That does include FHA loans. The primary lender originates the loan. The secondary mortgage market purchases it. Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie are players on the secondary mortgage market. Questions? Yen's not budging, you guys. She's staying on top. Our devil, Lewis, Skater Girl, Gracie. 4 of you are on fire. Answer streak of 3 in a row. Does it tell you on your app if you're on fire? Do you see that on your end? Does it give you it does tell you? Okay, good, good. So you know who you are. Give yourselves a little pat on the back if you're on fire. It doesn't tell me. Question number 5, a mortgage loan that is secured by both real and personal property. You're buying real and personal property. Ten seconds. Is a package mortgage. A package mortgage combines real property and personal property. So if you're buying a furnished condo, for example, you could do so with a package mortgage. A blanket mortgage covers more than one parcel of land. So you're buying 3 parcels of land to divvy them up, subdivide them, whatever. So blanket mortgage, you're buying more than one parcel of land. Package mortgage, you're buying real property and personal property. You're combining, you're packaging the two. Questions on this one? Purchase money mortgage is what? With your mouths, I can say it. Purchase money mortgage is what? Seller financing. Purchase money mortgage is seller financing. Yep. Yen, Skater Girl, Gracie, Kebab Creeked Up, Devil Person, Veronica is our highest climber this round. At settlement, commission generally appears as a ten seconds. Debit to the seller. Seller pays commission. Seller pays CDE, commission, deed preparation fee, and excise tax. Seller pays commissions. Questions? Got to watch that, hitting those buttons. I wish Kahoot would let you go back. But then again, I don't want you second guessing yourself either. Yen is staying on top. She's not budged the whole time. Gracie, Lewis, Tara, Skater Girl, and Smiley Face is our highest climber this round, up 4 places. All right, let's see if she can hold top this time. Which of the following items is not usually prorated between buyer and seller? What is not a shared expense between the buyer and the seller? Ten seconds. The recording fees. We're going to prorate this year's property taxes. We're going to prorate HOA dues. HOA dues might be monthly, they might be quarterly, they might be annually, but either way, we're going to share that. And then we're also going to prorate rent. Each party gets to pay their own recording fees. So the buyer pays to have the deed and the deed of trust recorded. The seller will pay their recording fees, are like loan payoff recording fees. So when they pay that mortgage off, they get to pay that. Each party pays their own recording fees. Questions on this one? Good Kahoot. We're having a good night. I'm digging it. Questions before we do the big reveal? All right. The third place winner of this Kahoot is Skater Girl. I love that, by the way. Second place is Gracie. And our first place is, did she hang on top? Yen. So good job, everybody. Fourth and fifth runner up or Kebab. Okay, a little devil, you got to tell me who you are. Tell me if you don't want to fess up, you tell me in private chat. Questions? All right. Take a big deep breath. Unit 17, here we go. 17 is our appraisal unit. We are going to talk about how the real estate agent plays into determining listing prices, what the real estate agent's part is in helping the buyer determine how much they should offer. But the highlight of unit 17 is the appraisal unit. So we're going to kind of, for the most part, wear our appraisal's hat in this unit. We are going to define various definitions of value. We're going to explain the 3 steps that the appraiser uses to determine value. There are 3 approaches that the appraiser can use. And then we're going to do a little bit of math, calculate those different approaches to value. So the first thing we need to do on page 434, the very first paragraph, if you don't want to write it down, is define an appraisal. And an appraisal is an estimate or opinion of value completed by a licensed appraiser of a specific property as of a specific date. So let's break this definition down. An appraisal is an estimate or an opinion. It is one person's opinion, which means, wouldn't it be possible if you had 2 appraisals, you could have 2 different values? You could have 2 different opinions. The appraiser doesn't determine actual value. The appraiser gives their opinion of what they think the value. Just knowing what you know, who do you think actually determines value? If it's not the appraiser that's determining value, what a property's worth, who's actually determining the value of the property? Anybody want to venture a guess? Who's determining what a property's worth? The one that is actually determining value is the one that's paying for it, the buyer. The buyer is the one that decides if it's worth it or not. Think about the buyer as just a consumer in this transaction. You and I are consumers, right? A home just has a bigger price tag on it. Let's say we go shopping tomorrow and you're flipping through a rack of clothes and you pull out a sweater and you say, well, goodness, that's a nice sweater. I like that a whole lot. And then you look at the price tag, and that price tag is more than what you would ever pay for a sweater. Is that sweater worth its value to you? You're probably going to gently put it back down so you don't snag it and walk away from it, right? It doesn't have the value to you, thus you're not going to pay for it. The only way a buyer is going to pay for a house is if it has that value to them. So the appraiser offers their opinion. I had some good answers. A couple of you said the market helps drive that. Right now, the market is driving the buyers. The tax assessors, we did talk about tax assessors in the unit 3. The process for figuring out tax assessed value for taxes and the process for the appraisal for loan origination, which is this unit, are 2 totally different things. So please keep those separate. The appraisal to determine value for the lender is different than the process to determine assessed value. So an estimate or opinion of value completed by licensed appraisers. Appraisers have to be licensed. They don't have to have a real estate license, but they get an appraisal license. So they go through school and they have to take a test. There's the North Carolina Appraisals Board. Appraisers, before they can go out and appraise on their own, they have to shadow. I don't know if this is accurate. Please don't hold me to this. But I've heard before that they have to shadow like 200 appraisals. They have to shadow an experienced appraiser a lot before they can go out on their own and give their own value, their own opinion of value. But your appraiser is licensed. The appraisal reflects a specific property. The appraisal is specific to 123 Main Street. The house next door is going to have a different value. The house across the street is going to have a different value. Even in your cookiest of cutters of neighborhood, every house is different. So specific property as of a specific date. Appraisals are generally only good for a specific date, for one date. We can use an appraisal for up to 6 months. So we can rely on the information of the appraisal for 6 months, but it's good for one specific date. Appraisers are not paid a commission. They're paid a flat fee. They get paid X amount to go appraise a home. That's fair. If appraisers were paid a percentage of the value, values would be skyrocketed, wouldn't they? They would jack that value up so they could get themselves some more money. So to help keep that out of the thought process, an appraisal's paid a fee, a flat fee. When a buyer's originating a new loan, an appraisal is required. If it's a cash value, they're welcome to get an appraisal if they like. They can pay and have it done. The appraisal, when the buyer's originating a new loan, is the property of the buyer. The buyer pays for it. It's their report. They don't have to share that with the seller. So the appraiser does an appraisal to determine value. Everybody good with me so far? The appraiser does the appraisal, that's hard, to determine value. The real estate agent does something called a comparative market analysis, also known as a CMA, or a broker price opinion, also known as a BPO. I'll talk about the difference in just a second. The real estate agent's job is to determine probable sales price or probable lease price. The appraiser determines or gives their opinion on value. You and I give our opinion on probable sales price. Only the appraiser gets to use the word value. I cannot use the word value because I'm not a licensed appraiser. You need to be very, very careful when you're at your listing appointment and you do a CMA for your seller to help them determine what they should list their house for. You need to be very careful that you do not say something like, your home is valued at X amount per my CMA. What you say is, based on my CMA, I think your probable sales price will be blah, blah, blah. Once upon a time ago, CMA and BPOs had different meanings. Today, we kind of use them interchangeably. But once upon a time ago, the CMA was what we did for general brokerage. So again, you're with the seller. They say, how much should I list my house for? We do a CMA to help them find probable sales price. Back in the day, the BPO was more set aside to offer my opinion for a third party, not a listing, not a buyer, but a third party. For example, I used to work for a firm that had a relocation company, and the relocation company was based up in Connecticut. And every once in a while, the relocation company in Connecticut wanted to know the probable sales price of a home here in Winston-Salem. And those guys up there in Connecticut had no idea about Winston-Salem's market. So they would hire me to do a BPO, to do a broker price opinion. I'm not getting this listing. I have no chance of getting this listing. It's not general brokerage. They're paying me for my opinion on probable sales price. And that was the broker price opinion. Again, today, we just mix them all up. But once back in the day, they used to mean something different. We talked about doing the CMA for the seller would help them determine the listing price. We also do CMAs for buyers. When your buyer finds the home, their dream home, and they look at you and they say, how much should I offer? We give them their opinion, give them our opinion by doing a CMA and telling them the probable sales price. Anybody good so far? Appraiser gives their opinion on value. You and I give our opinion on probable sales price. Take the word value out of your vocabulary right now, unless you plan on signing up for appraisal school next. A provisional broker cannot do a BPO for a fee. You can do a BPO, but you can't do it for a fee. So again, my example, the relocation company up in Connecticut, they paid me to do that. They paid me for my opinion. I was a full broker. They could pay me to do that. Provisional brokers can't get paid a fee to do a BPO. And nobody, I don't care who you are, provisional broker, broker in charge, or full broker, can charge for a CMA that's part of our general brokerage services. It's part of my job anyway, to help the seller determine the listing price. It's part of my job anyway, to help the buyer determine how much they should offer. I'm already being paid to do that. What are you going to do? Look at your seller and say, I'll tell you what you think your list price is if you cut me a check. We can't do that. It's part of my job anyway, general brokerage services. Provisional brokers cannot charge a separate fee. Nobody can charge a fee to do our job. So let's talk about value. And to talk about value, we got to talk about dust. Dust helps us remember the characteristics of value. Value is just the relationship between an item desired and a potential buyer. The buyer's the consumer. They're the purchaser. They're the ones out buying this. And the buyers are the one that determine that value. And value is determined by remembering dust. We have to have demand. There has to be a need. And with that need has to come the financial means to be able to pay for it. Value has utility. It has to satisfy the future owner's needs, their desires. How can you utilize this property to make it work for you and your family? Value is affected by scarcity. There's only so much land to go around. Land is scarce. Why do you think we're starting to build up in so many places? Running out of land. This is why any property on the water is scarce. There's only so much land going up and down the East Coast, up and down the ocean. And then ease of transferability of ownership. Can we transfer the title easily? Clear marketable title. So value has dust. Market value is the most probable price a property will bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite to a fair sale. The appraiser determines the most probable price. It's not an exact. We still don't know what a buyer is willing to pay for it, but the appraiser gives their opinion. Probable is not a guarantee. That's what's happening in this market. Appraisers are saying what the probable price is. Buyers are driving that up. Buyers are driving up value. It's not the appraisers driving up value. It's the buyers, because they're willing to pay more for a property than what they were. If we compare market value to market price, market value is our appraisal process, gives us a probable price. Market price is what somebody actually paid for it. What a buyer's willing to pay versus what an appraiser thinks it's worth. Also compare market value to market cost. Again, market value is the appraisal process. Market cost are your past expenditures. Some homeowners think that when they invest money in a home, they're going to get 100% return. If you replace a 30-year roof with a brand new roof, you've added value, but you're not going to get 100% return from that roof. I always liken market cost. I've always heard, I've never got to experience this, but I've always heard the moment you drive a brand new car off the lot, as soon as it hits the road, it starts losing value. And that's the same thing we're doing here with market cost. You put a new roof on it, you get a hailstorm, a rainstorm, snow, right? That roof starts taking damage. Again, it does add value, but you're not going to get 100% return. Cost does not represent value. I think the example in your book, where are we, 436, I think it talks about a pool. Just because you put in $15,000 to install a pool doesn't mean you can tack on $15,000 to the sales price. It doesn't work. It's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's a pretty pig now. I had potential sellers once, and they were the sweetest couple. I wished I could have helped them, but I was at the listing appointment, and we got to the part of the appointment where they said, "What do you think we can sell our home for?" And I said, "Here's my CMA. Based on my research, I think your probable sales price will be between 95,000 and 100,000." And their faces fell. I mean, fell. It was heartbreaking at that moment. And I thought, uh-oh. And I said, "What were you guys thinking?" And they said, "We were thinking 135,000. We're a little off now, aren't we? I'm saying 100, they're saying 135. And I said, "Talk to me. Where are we coming up with this 135? At that point, he handed me a piece of paper that showed me all the money they put into that home. We put in a new water heater. We did this, we did that, da, da, da. He was tallying up their market cost. And I said, "Thank you for sharing this with me. Let me go back and look numbers again, talk to my team leader." I called my team leader. I said, "Will you help me crunch numbers?" She said, "Jules," she said, "maybe 102 on a lucky day." And she said, "But there's no way we can get them 135. It just doesn't work that way." So I talked to him again. I ended up not taking that listing because I couldn't promise them, I couldn't guarantee them that I would get them what they wanted. When I lose a listing for any reason, I will stalk that listing because I want to know who gets it and for how much. I stalked that for months and I never did see it hit the market. I gave up on it and moved on. But I have a feeling all the agents they talked to, it had something to do with their definition of value and us trying to realize the buyer's definition of value. Does that make sense? Questions are in this market, I probably could have done it, truth be told. If that conversation happened today, I probably could have sold it for 135 or more, but we weren't in this market at that time. Okay. Still talking about value, some forces that influence value. Social forces influence value. Trends in our family dynamics are constantly changing. Single family homes, single parents owning homes, family size, longevity. We're seeing social force trends of adult kids moving back home with mom and dad. We're seeing cases of mom and dad moving into adult kids' homes. So our social forces, our dynamic under the roof is constantly changing, constantly affected by value. Economic forces affect value. Income and employment levels. When a big major factory announces they're moving to an area, man, values boom. When another factory announces they're shutting their doors, values go the other way. Economic forces, absolutely. Property taxations. How much is each city, each county, each municipality charging for taxes? Current interest rates. That's the force that's driving value today. Interest rates are historically low. Political forces are government activities. Any zoning amendments, building codes, tax structures, political forces absolutely affect values. I've been in real estate 20 years. So how many presidential elections have I been through in real estate? A couple. I'll tell you, every 4 years when we're up for a presidential election, it affects real estate because people don't want to buy or sell until we know the outcome of that election. And when the parties change sides, the other side comes out of the woodwork. They've been sitting on their money for the last 4 years, 8 years. Now their person's in, they're ready to spend some money. Political forces absolutely affect value. And then environmental conditions, physical forces, the topography of the land, the lay of the land. How hilly is it? How treey is it? What's the location to public transportation? What's the proximity to jobs, to your amenities? You guys have your grocery store? One grocery store you go to, your go-to? That's part of your physical forces. You're physically drawn to that amenity. Some words to understand, appraiser's words. Remember, we have our appraiser hat on. So some appraiser's words to understand. Highest and best use is probably the most important thing on this slide. Does anybody remember we talked about this in Unit 1? We mentioned it in Unit 1. I said, we're going to see this again in Unit 17. And here we are. Highest and best use. Every single property has one use, which is its most profitable use. What is its most profitable use? Now, you own the property, you can do with it whatever you want. But if you're not utilizing the highest and best use, then you're not getting the most profitable use out of that property. Highest and best use can and does change. But you can only have one, each property can only have one highest and best use at a time. And whenever the appraiser is offering their opinion, they will always consider, is the property maximizing its highest and best use? The appraiser will always look at that. The theory of substitution. The theory of substitution says that when consumers are faced with two items with essentially the same amenities, we tend to pick the cheaper of the two. We tend to pick the less expensive of the two. We're substituting the less expensive for the more expensive. Think about comparison shopping. Supply and demand, economics 101. Supply and demand says what? When supply goes up, demand goes down. When demand goes up, supply goes down. We don't talk about supply and demand in real estate. In real estate, we talk about buyers markets and sellers markets. Right now, we're in a seller's market. Why? Because supply is low and demand is high. One day that pendulum will swing back. We'll be in a buyer's market, and we'll be in a buyer's market because supply is high and demand is low. The theory of conformity says that maximum value of a property is reached when it matches its surrounding areas. It conforms to its surroundings. Have you guys ever been out for a nice Sunday afternoon drive and you're on this two-lane road out in the middle of nowhere, meandering along, and you pass one level brick ranch after one level brick ranch after one level brick ranch, and you round the corner and bam, there's this monstrosity up on the hill that's like 3 stories, gated community. That thing doesn't conform. It doesn't match its surrounding areas. Not saying it doesn't have value. It has lots of value. Look at that thing. But it doesn't conform to its surrounding areas. Anticipation can affect value, some future benefit or detriment surrounding the property. Maybe it's a truth, maybe it's a rumor. But the anticipation of the good or bad that could come out of it. Where are my Kernersville people? Kernersville, that dang belt loop. How long have we been anticipating that? There's properties all up and down that belt loop that has been anticipating that thing. We are finally driving on a portion of it. Very exciting. I moved to High Point 22 years ago and they were talking about it then. Anticipation of that thing coming. Contribution looks at how any improvement contributes to the value of the property. How does it contribute to the value of the property? I'm all about homeowners doing what they want to their home while they own it. But they need to understand the neighborhood, the area has to support that contribution for it to have value. Not all neighborhoods can support granite countertops. I'm not saying don't put in granite countertops. Go nuts. It's your home. You want granite countertops? Do it. But understand the neighborhood, the surrounding area may not be able to support that contribution that you made to your home. Have you guys ever heard of somebody over improving their home? Again, do what you want, your home, go nuts. But the area has to support it. Competition, when we talk about competition, or when the appraisers talk about competition, think about retail areas. Think about your favorite retail shopping center. I tend to talk about Thruway Shopping Center. Profits attract competition. What does Thruway want you to do? If you go to Moe's for lunch, Thruway wants you to go to Rack Room, and then they want you to go to that little kitchen gadget store, and then they want you to go to Dewey's, right? Thruway wants that when you go there for one thing, Thruway Shopping Center wants to keep you there. So you keep spending money. I like that, pricing yourself out of the neighborhood. And then change. Change is inevitable. You drive around the Triad or wherever you live, you're bound to see construction. You're bound to see buildings being built, buildings being torn down. You're bound to see change. Part of the appraiser's job is to study the past of the area to help them better predict the value of today and the future. Questions on our appraiser's words? Okay. Let's take a break. Come back. We keep going in unit 17. All right. Everybody doing good? Good. Good, good. Cameras are on. Starting on page 438, we talked just a little bit about the appraisal process, just so we have a bit of an understanding of what the appraiser does, what they look for. Again, I'm not appraising the property, but you might have a buyer or a seller have questions. How did they come to this opinion of value? So let's talk a little bit about the appraisal process. The appraiser looks at two sets of data. Specific data is information about the subject property. The subject property is the property that the appraiser is studying to put their opinion of value on. That's your subject property. 123 Main Street. I'm offering my opinion of value on 123 Main Street. So they're studying everything about the property, the improvements, the updates. General data is information about the surrounding area, the neighborhood, the subdivision, the community. So they study the area. And on page 438 to 439, you have the steps that an appraiser takes. We're not going to go through this, but I do recommend you guys just take a look at it. Not that I think you're going to be tested on it, but again, I think it helps to kind of see what the appraiser's looking for. Trust me, your buyers and sellers will ask you, where did they come up with this? Where did they get this value? So obviously we need to, defer all questions to the appraiser, but we can kind of help, with a basic understanding of how this works. Turn with me then, if you will, to page 441. Did y'all bring your magnifying glass with you to class tonight? 441 is our sample appraisal report. And by the way, this is about how these things look in real world. At least in real world, you get a PDF that you can blow up and actually see it. But do you guys see the black bar on the left-hand side? Can you make that out? You're looking at different categories of the appraisal report. So there's the subject, contract, neighborhood, site, improvements. That's also defined for you back on page 440. You guys see 440, it talks about the subject, the neighborhood, the site, the description of improvement. So they kind of helped you a little bit by blowing that up. We're getting ready to talk about some things that we're going to find in the appraisal report. And the last thing we do in this unit, which we won't finish tonight, so we'll finish this up next week when we come together. But once we go through and have the rest of this conversation about the unit, we're going to come back and look at this appraisal report again, and it's going to make more sense after we've talked about it. The appraisal report continues on 442. Again, if you want to know what you're looking at, that black bar on the side, on the left-hand side, is defined back on page 440. So those are the features of the appraisal report. And what matters to the lender, what the lender's looking for, at the bottom of page 442 is the appraiser's reconciliation. And that's the appraiser's opinion. So they've studied the property. They use their approaches to determine value, which we're getting ready to talk about. And then in the end, they give their opinion called the reconciliation. And when you're originating a loan, that's what the lender cares about. Remember what we said, the lender defines value as the sales price or the appraisal, whichever is less. So when that appraisal comes back, the lender's turning straight to 442, the bottom at the reconciliation, to see what the appraiser thinks that it's worth. So we'll look at more of this. We'll look at 442 and 443 once we go through and talk about it again. We'll finish this up on Tuesday. We won't get through it tonight. Do you have any questions so far before we get into the 3 approaches to value? Okay. When the appraiser is arriving at their opinion of value, they can use as many of the 3 approaches of value as they can. They're going to use as many approaches as they can. And the first approach that the appraiser will try to use is called the sales comparison approach, also known as the market data approach. As we're going to learn in just a second, the appraiser's sales comparison approach is the closest thing that we have to our CMA. So the sales comparison approach, and we'll talk a little bit more about the CMA in just a second. The theory behind the sales comparison approach is we're going to compare the subject property. Remember, the subject property is a property that we're studying, the property that the appraiser is trying to determine value. They're going to compare the subject property to recently sold closed properties nearby. Recently sold closed properties nearby with similar features, as similar as we can. Understanding no 2 parcels of land are exactly the same. They're all different. They're all unique. All homes are different. The reason we look, or the appraiser looks at recently sold comparable properties nearby, is because the appraiser uses that when determining value for the subject property. The appraiser can say, well, this is what a buyer was willing to pay for this house 3 months ago across the street. So based on that, I can offer my opinion on what a buyer would pay for this house today. We try recently sold. We try to go 6 months, or the appraiser tries to go 6 months. Try not to go back further than 6 months, but in some markets, like this market, you may have to go back a little bit further. The economy changes, it fluctuates. The value of a home 4 years ago means absolutely nothing today. So that's why we want recently sold. I want properties nearby. You go from one side of town to the other, you change the value. You guys remember the 3 most important things of real estate? I know you all know this. You knew this before you came to me. Location, location, location. Where a property is located has value. You could put value at a home in Winston-Salem, take that same home, pick it up, move it to Greensboro, and it's going to have a different value because you've changed the location. And we want homes with similar features. The appraiser tries to compare, for example, a ranch to a ranch, condo to condo. Would it be fair to compare a condo to a 2-story brick home with a garage? Those aren't similar, are they? We want similar features. Specifically, things that the appraiser will look at with the sales comparison approach. The data sale, again, they try to stick to go back closing 6 months ago. With inventory so low right now, that means closings are down. So you may have to go back a little bit further. That 6 months is not set in stone. The appraiser is only going to look at closed comps. They're not going to look at active. They're not going to look at under contract, because an active listing doesn't tell me what a buyer's willing to pay for it. I only know what a buyer's willing to pay for it when they've actually paid that price. Location, again, as close as we can, as close proximity as we can. How far out do you go? Really just depends on how far out you need to go to find comps. What's the density of the area? If you're downtown, it's more dense. Then you go out into a rural area. They look at physical features of the property. What's the age of the subject property and the comparables? What's the lot size? What's the square footage? Number of bedrooms, garage, fireplace. What are the features of the subject property as compared to your closed comp? And then terms and conditions of the sale. Foreclosures, for example, tend to sell for a lot less expensive. They can actually drive down values in the neighborhood. The bank doesn't care about maintaining values of the neighborhood. The bank just wants to sell the home for enough to get their money back. So with the sales comparison approach, when the appraiser studies the subject property, never ever adjust the subject property. They always adjust the comps to match the subject. So let's pretend this blue line right here is our subject property. And let's say you have a comp that has a superior feature. Maybe our subject property has 3 bedrooms and the comp the appraiser studying has 4. In order for the appraiser to get an opinion of value on the subject property, they're going to reduce that comp by a bedroom. They're going to adjust the comp to match the subject. Similarly, if a comp had an inferior feature, a feature less than the subject property, let's say again, our subject has 3 bedrooms and the comp has 2, they're going to add value to the comp to make it match the subject. You adjust the comps to match the subject. Never ever adjust the subject. You always adjust the comps to match the subject. You guys want to play a little game real quick? Let's play a little game. If you can, stand up if you want to. If not, if you want to stay seated, that's fine. Just kind of push yourself back a little bit. I don't want you to hit your screen. And I'm actually going to stop sharing so we can all see each other. And by saying if you can stand up, that's assuming you're decent from the waist down, please. So give yourself some room, back up, stand up, or give yourself some room. Everybody take your left hand, make a fist, and hold it straight out in front of you. We're going to call your left hand your subject property. Your subject property is never going to move. Your left hand will be starting to go to sleep by the time I'm done with you. It's never going to move. Take a right hand, make a fist, and hold it straight up over your head. Your right hand is your first comp. Your left hand is your subject property. Your subject has 3 bedrooms. Your comp has 4. What do I have to do to the comp to make it match the subject? I lower it. I reduce the comp by the value of the cost of a bedroom until it matches my subject property. Now I have matching features. Now shake your right hand, make a fist, and hold it down by your side. Now your subject is higher than your comp, right? Your subject has features that your comp doesn't. How do you make your right hand match your left hand? You add to it. You increase, you add value. So now you have matching features. Is your left hand asleep yet? Because your left hand never moves. Never, ever. You guys are fun. Was that fun? Get some blood thrown through you for the next 40 minutes or so. You never, ever adjust your subject. You always adjust the comps to match your subject. A superior comp adjusts down to match, an inferior comp adjusts up. Y'all can do that at PSI Testing Center too when you're counting on your fingers and looking at your butt. When you start adjusting these comps, because that's the tricky part. How do I adjust my comps? As we said a few minutes ago, our CMA BPO is based on this approach to the sales comparison. Guys, here's the deal. I'm not an appraiser. I don't know what the value is of a bedroom. I have no clue. CMAs don't adjust value. We get an idea. We study close comps nearby, similar close comps nearby, and we get an idea, but I can't put value on anything. I can't tell you, oh, your fireplace is worth this much. I'm not an appraiser. I can't give value. For your exam, you will adjust comps. We'll look at this in just a second. They got to tell you the value. They got to tell you what a bedroom's worth. They got to tell you what a fireplace is worth. You guys with me? They got to give you that information. If you really want to know how to put the value on a bedroom, go to appraiser school. The sales comparison approach is the best approach when the appraiser is trying to determine value for single family homes and land. So when we're selecting comps, we're looking for as similar to the subject as possible. The fewer adjustments to the comps you have to make, or the appraiser has to make, the better. The fewer adjustments you have to make, the better. Again, we want something that's recently sold. The appraiser assigns the dollar value to the differences. The appraiser can say, in this area, a bedroom goes for X amount, a bathroom goes, a garage goes. The appraiser puts the value on that. And when they're coming to their conclusion, they use a correlation. It's a weighted average. Some things are more important than others. Some things are more valuable than others. So square foot, for example, is not going to have the same weight as a bedroom. Let's grab your books. Let's look at a sales comparison approach on page 446. You can see our subject property is 155 Potter Drive. That's our subject property. That's the property the appraiser's studying to put their opinion of value on. And they're going to compare 155 Potter Drive to comp A, B, C, D, and E. This appraiser went above and beyond. They say if you can get 3 to 4 good comps. So this one went a little bit further. You got the sales prices of A, B, C, D, and E. This is what a buyer was willing to pay for property A. This is what a buyer was willing to pay for property C. And then you start looking at the features. There's location, there's age, size of lot. You see, we deducted some value from comp C because it's a larger lot. This is the subject's lot. This is comp C's lot. So how do we make a match? We deduct it by $5,000 in value. It's larger. If something's the same, we don't have to deduct it. So once the appraiser goes through and puts value on the differences, they adjust the value. So for example, comp A, a buyer was willing to pay $118,000 for it. We deducted $1,500 for a better exterior condition and adjusted the value of the purchase price to $116,500. Comparing comp A to the subject property, it's more likely that a buyer's willing to pay $116,500 for it because the subject property doesn't have as good of an exterior condition. So they're adjusting the comps to match the subject. Sales comparison approach. When we come together on Tuesday, I'll do a CMA. We're getting ready to talk about CMAs. I'll give myself some homework this weekend and I'll do a CMA so we can look at what we see versus what the appraiser sees with the sales comparison approach. So we'll do that. Any questions so far? Yeah, Veronica.
And maybe I just missed it, but so we're looking at the example 17.2 and it says subject property 155 Potter, but where are the details of the property?
Right below it.
Okay, so
So you see it says none, good, 6 years, 60 by 135, good, brick, ranch. That's your subject property.
so much.
It's a lot, yeah.
Thanks.
Sure. So the appraiser, once they have the adjusted values of the comps, now they can do their correlation to determine based on these 5 comps. Now that I've adjusted these comps to match the subject, based on these 5 comps, the appraiser says, this is your probable value. This is my opinion of value. You and I say, this is your probable sales price. Depending on what license you have, depends on what you get to say. Okay, and again, I'll do a CMA. We'll look at that. Other questions on our sales comparison approach? I've always been interested in appraisal and appraising. I'm scared of appraisal school though. I don't do well on the other side of the desk. Maybe one day. So as we said, the appraiser uses a sales comparison approach. The real estate agent does a CMA. The CMA is the informal version. I'm not going to give a specific number. I'm going to report it as a range. Did you guys hear me earlier when I was talking about that sweet couple that I went to the listing appointment and I looked at them and I said, based on my CMA, I think your probable sales price is going to be between $95,000 and $100,000. I didn't tell them I think I could sell their house for 98. I gave them a probable sales price of a range. I would have been fine listing their home for 105, for example, understanding you listed a little bit more than the probable sales price, understanding you got some wiggle room for negotiations. When I'm doing a CMA for a listing appointment for a seller, in addition to studying closed comps, I'm also going to look at current active properties, and I'm going to look at expired listings. Why would looking at currently for sale properties, why would that affect us if I'm getting ready to list your house?
Competition too.
As your competition. That's right. I know you want to sell your house, but the guy across the street is also trying to sell his house for X amount. These are the features of their house. This is what their house looks like. When I'm at the listing appointment, why would I care? Why would I have a conversation with the seller about expired listings.
They didn't sell for a reason. They were too high.
It didn't sell for a reason. And while I don't know what that reason is, presumably it was listed higher than what a buyer was willing to pay for it. So if you have expired listings to show your seller, when your seller digs their heels in and says, no, I want you to put it on the market for 140. I hear your research and your fancy CMA is going to get me $95,000 to $100,000, but I want you to list it for 140. You're like, look, this guy was on the market for 6 months at 138 and it didn't budge. It didn't close. So we can use the CMA to show sellers when things are, I'm not going to say they're overpriced, but they were priced at a point that a buyer wasn't willing to pay for it. When you're listing a home, not in this market, but when we get back to normal, it's not uncommon for properties to have days on market. We might be on the market for a month, maybe 4. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with the house. It's just a more normal market to be on the market for a month or 2. Anytime you talk to your seller about price, you need to do a fresh CMA. So you list a house, you do a CMA. A month from now, you haven't sold, the seller says, ooh, how are we doing? Don't rely on the CMA you did a month ago. Keep that thing current. Whenever you're having a conversation with a seller, do them a new CMA. Because as closed comps change, probable sales price changes. CMAs are a client level service. If you are my customer, I can provide you with market data. I'm not going to provide a customer with a CMA. Only my clients get that level of service. Once you guys get licensed, you're going to join your firms and be prepared for a lot more training. Real estate license or pre-licensing class, we're giving you just enough to be dangerous. And then we're going to hand you a license and let you run amok on the street. So you affiliate with your firms and they're going to try to keep you tamed a little bit and they're going to give you training. And training on how to pull CMAs absolutely will be part of it. Your local board of realtors may offer CMA training every once in a while. As a matter of fact, next week, I'm going to a class through the Winston-Salem Board of Realtors about appraisals and CMAs. And it's going to be done, it's going to be taught by an appraiser. So I'll be interested to see what fun things I learned there that I can come back and share with you guys. It's really important that you learn how to properly do these things from the get-go. Oh no. Because the real estate commission will hold you competent, will hold you accountable, excuse me, for performing in a competent manner. You can't just pull some data for the sake of pulling data. What you're looking for, how you're doing it, you will get plenty of training afterwards. Your BIC will help you when you do your first CMAs. But even after you've been doing it, sometimes it helps to have somebody else's opinion. Again, my story about the sweet couple that I couldn't help. They challenged me with what they wanted to sell it for, $135,000. And I went back to my team leader and said, let's look at these numbers together, because sometimes 2 sets of eyes is better than 1. Sometimes 2 heads is better than 1. So even as long as I've been doing it, sometimes it helps to have somebody else look at it with you. This is one of these things that you never actually perfect. The truth is you can make these numbers look like whatever you want to. But if you're not doing them right, if you're not doing them in a competent manner, the real estate commission will possibly discipline your license. Questions or comments on that? Training, lots and lots of training. every time we Kahoot, I get an email from Kahoot that tells me, you just finished a Kahoot, and if I wanted to, I could go in and look at your results, which I never do because I don't have time. I got an email from Kahoot. I've never seen this before. Y'all want to know what the email says by the Kahoot we just finished? It says, beautifully played. Kahoot's even recognizing how good you did. Beautifully played, Kahoot. Isn't that exciting? Questions about the sales comparison approach or the CMA. So let's talk about adjusting these comps. You may, and I'm stressing the word may, I think for the most part, when you see this on your exams, they're going to tell you the value. They're going to say a bedroom is worth X amount, bathroom is worth X amount right there. Like they're going to tell you the value. If they ever expect you to find the value of something, it's going to be something where there's only one thing that's different. So for example, comp 1 has 3 bedrooms and it sold for $250. Comp 2 has 4 bedrooms and it sold for $254.5. Based on this information, what's the value of a bedroom worth? So we can take the difference in the sales prices to determine a bedroom is worth $4,500 because the bedroom is the only difference. I don't know that you'll see this or not. And again, if they give this to you, it's only one difference. You're only comparing the 2 comps to determine that value of the bedroom. The only thing that's different is one has 3 bedrooms and one has 4. I think what you're most likely to see, and I got to stop sharing my screen for 1 second. I forgot I needed a whiteboard. Hang on. What I call a whiteboard, you guys call Microsoft Word, but it works. All right, let me come back and get you guys. What you're more apt to see on your exam is similar to what we looked at on page 446. You're going to study the subject property, and then you're going to adjust the comps to match the subject property. When you're doing these, I highly suggest that you set it up similar to what you see on page 446. So you got the subject property, you got comp 1, and you got comp 2. And then over on the left, we're going to look at features. So I got a bedroom, I got a bathroom, I got a garage. Is that it? Yeah. And then the sold price. So when I'm studying these features, I first just lay out my subject. The problem tells me the subject has 3 bedrooms, it has 2 baths, a 1-car garage. And what I'm trying to define is the price, the probable sales price for subject 1. Comp 1 has 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a 1-car garage. And it recently sold for $118,000. Comp 2 has 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a 2-car garage, and it recently sold for $123,000. I tend to think that my whiteboard is a lot easier to see, a lot easier to work with than this big run-on paragraph on the PowerPoint here. So I can do my side-by-side comparison. I can study my subject property as it relates to the comps. I'm going to study comp 1 compared to the subject, and I'm going to study comp 2 compared to the subject. And then it gave me the values. Again, the suggestion is you look at 3 or 4. This one just has 2 as an introduction, but in the real world, you're going to want to find at least 3 good comps, 4 if you can. So let's adjust our comps to match our value. We're going to go through comp 1 together, and then I'll let you guys look at comp 2. So my subject has 3 bedrooms. Comp 1 has 2. I'm sorry. Yeah, comp 1 has 2. What do I have to do to my comp to make it match my subject? I have to increase it, which means to the sales price, I add the value of a bedroom. I adjusted my comp to match my subject. My subject has 2 bathrooms. Comp 1 has 1. What do I do to adjust it? Again, I add the value of a bathroom. The problem tells me that bathrooms go for $4,000. My subject has a 1-car garage. My comp has a 1-car garage. I don't need to do anything, do I? We're already adjusted. So now to adjust the value of my comp to match my subject, I take the price that a buyer paid for it. I add the value of a bathroom, and I add the value of a bedroom. And now I have an adjusted value of $126,500. I adjusted my comps to match my subject. Why don't you guys take a few minutes and look at comp 2? And let me just say, guys, we're not getting into semantics here. We're not getting into arguments. A half a bath is half of the cost of a bath. Don't argue with me about that's not true. For our purposes, a half of a bath is worth the value, half of the value of a bathroom. Okay, so you guys take a minute, study comp 2 as it relates to the subject. And let me know in a private chat what you think the adjusted value of comp 2 is. You got 30 more seconds and we'll talk about it. Okay. So did you study comp 2 as it relates to the subject? So let's look at this. My subject has 3 bedrooms. Comp 2 has 3 bedrooms. Do I have an adjustment to make there? No, we already matched. We're good to go, right? My subject has 2 bathrooms. My comp has 1.5. What do I have to do to make them match? I have to add the value of a half bedroom. And for argument's sakes, a half bedroom is the value of a bath divided by 2. So you would add a value for the half bath of $2,000. My subject property has a 1-car garage. Comp 2 has a 2-car garage. What do I need to do to make my comp match my subject? I need to deduct the value of a garage. And the problem tells me that a 1-car garage in this area goes for $5,000. So I take my $123,000 sales price that a buyer was willing to pay for it, add $2,000 for the half bath, and deduct $5,000 for the garage, which brings me to a value, an adjusted value of $120,000. Questions on what we just did?
Julie,
Yeah,
could you explain to me as to why we deducted that 5,000?
because my subject has a 1-car garage and my comp has a 2-car garage. So in order to make my comp match my subject, I have to deduct it by the value of a 1-car garage. Now my comp has a 1-car garage.
One more question.
Yeah, of course.
So in other words, by them having 2, it was actually a 10,000, correct?
When they built it, if you want to think
Yes.
about it that way, when they built it, yes, because 1 car is 5,000, so a 2-car would go for 10.
Okay, and to make it match, you had to subtract one of them to make the match the subject.
There you go. You got it.
Okay.
They had 2. My subject only has 1.
Uh-huh.
So to make it match, I had to deduct 1. I still left them with 1, right? Because now they match my subject.
Uh-huh. So in that case, would that be if the subject, I'm sorry, if they had 4 bedrooms and your subject have 3, so you would subtract.
That's it.
Okay, so you would subtract from that, I'm sorry, you would subtract from that 45,000 if they had.
I would subtract
Yeah,
from the
4,500.
price that a buyer was willing to pay. I add and subtract from the sales price that the buyer was willing to pay.
Okay.
That's what that 123 is. That's what it recently sold for. And
Mhm.
what I know about that 123 is that some buyer somewhere was willing to pay $123,000 for a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath with a 2-car garage. And so to make that comp match my subject, I'm going to adjust the comps up or down to match the subject.
Okay.
Somebody asked why we didn't use 1,000 for bath, because a half a bath is all the difference. And if a full bath goes for 4,000, again, we're not an appraiser school. So if a full bath goes for 4,000, then half a bath goes for 2. What other questions do we have? Is this fun? Some people say this is fun. It's interesting, if nothing else, even if I have a weird idea of what fun is, it's interesting, if nothing else. Any questions at all on the sales comparison approach that the appraisers do and the CMA that the agent does? Again, we'll look at a CMA on Tuesday when we come together. Can I erase this? Is everybody good? Everybody have it? Okay. So one of the appraisers' approach to value is the sales comparison approach. Another way that an appraiser can help determine their opinion on value is by using the cost approach. The cost approach is best for special use properties. Think schools, churches, libraries, hospitals. New construction. If you have a new construction subdivision, I can't compare it to a neighborhood nearby that was built in the 60s. That's not fair. We're talking 40, 50, 60 years apart. Cost approach is typically best for new construction as well. And what the cost approach does is it separates, it puts value on the land and it puts value on the structure, the appraiser. So the appraiser studies the land. Maybe they're using a sales comparison approach to study the land. Maybe they're using a how much per square foot is this land worth approach. They put a value on the land and then they put a value on the structure and then they add them together. We're going to talk about how they value the structure in just a second. When the appraiser's putting value on land, they're putting the value on just the land. They're pretending like the land is vacant. That's how they're separating it. For our purposes, land never depreciates. Structures can come and go, but the land is going to remain and it's not going to lose value. For our purposes, land does not depreciate. So the appraiser pretends as if the land is vacant. They put a value on the land. They pretend that the structure is not on land. And they put a value on the structure, and then they can combine the two. There's certain things they can look at when they're putting value on the structure. They can consider the structure by using a reproduction cost. If you were to rebuild this structure, an exact duplicate, it is exactly how it was originally constructed at current prices. That's your reproduction cost. How much would it cost you to rebuild an exact duplicate? Think about a historic building. If you were building a house in Old Salem, it would have to be built like an Old Salem house, at least the exterior. A replacement cost is not an exact duplicate, but it serves the same purpose. So today we have more modern churches and schools than what we did 60 years ago. They're probably all wired for Wi-Fi now and surround sound. Yeah, they didn't have that 60 years ago. Are you kidding me? So we're still building a school, but we're not building an exact duplicate. But it serves the same purpose. A school is a school is a school. When the appraiser is determining the replacement cost, they look at several different methods. Well, they may look at several different methods. Probably the most common method when looking at the replacement cost is called the square foot method. And they're determining the cost per square feet. How much does each square foot cost times the total number of square feet? So we find out how much each square foot in this church costs per square foot. Flashback from unit 4. Times the total number of square feet in this church. That's the most common. And that's our square foot method. Other approaches not as common. The unit in place method. Unit in place method looks at construction costs per unit of measure. So how much does each unit, what was the cost for each unit for material, labor, overhead? Each unit has a cost based on all its materials and labor. And then there's the quantity survey method. The quantity survey method looks at the raw materials needed to build this structure. When the truck pulls in with the wood on the back of it, that's your quantity survey method. I think of these, the one for you to understand the best is the square footage method because it's the most common. It's the easier one to do. I have how many square feet? Each square feet costs X amount. That gives me my replacement cost. When the appraiser is putting a price on the structure, remember, we're still pricing the structure, reproduction cost, replacement cost. Something else they have to consider is depreciation. The land does not depreciate, but the structure does. And depreciation is just the loss in value for any reason. Structures lose value over time. Structures lose depreciation, or they depreciate over time. So in just a second, I'm going to wrap it up here for today. When we come back together on Tuesday, we'll look at a CMA. We got different types of depreciation that we need to look at. And then we got to look at our third approach to value that the appraisers use. We will on Tuesday, where'd you guys go? I just lost you. There you are. We will on Tuesday, once we finish up unit 17, we're going to blow through unit 13 pretty quickly. Next week, we'll get started on units 11 and 12. We very well may even get into unit 19 next week. So please, I'm asking you guys to please look ahead this weekend, 17, 13, 11, and 12. We're getting near the end. I'm around if you guys have any questions. I'll hang out and answer questions. I'm always here. Otherwise, that's about all I have to say for tonight. So you guys, wait, let me make sure. Yeah, I think I'm good. If not, I'll make a note and say it on Tuesday. You guys have a good weekend. Enjoy your football game on Sunday or the concert in between, whatever you're going for. I will see you guys Tuesday night. Y'all have a good weekend.